This is Egypt. It's a huge country in northern Africa, bordering Libya, Sudan, and Israel right here. But this is also Egypt, with only the populated areas highlighted on the map. As you can see, most of Egypt's territory is uninhabited. Let me show you another one. A satellite image of Egypt. This one. In fact, 96% of its territory is desert. The only populated part of the country is this long, narrow green area alongside the Nile River. That's because the Nile is the main and almost only source of freshwater in Egypt. More than 95% of its freshwater comes from the Nile River. That's why this river has always been vitally important to Egypt from ancient times to this day. It provided ancient Egypt with fertile soil, water for irrigation, and therefore made it possible for the ancient Egyptians to grow foods in the middle of the desert. It played a key role as a means of transportation as well. They traveled from Egypt's south to north through the Nile River and transported materials to build cities. Even most of the materials of the famous pyramids were moved from southern Egypt by barges on the Nile. In short, the Nile meant everything to ancient Egypt. As a matter of fact, it still means everything to Egypt. Today, after 3,000 years, Egypt still heavily depends on the Nile River, maybe more than ever. Now Egypt has a population of 105 million people, and it puts a huge strain on the Nile. More water is used to drink, to take a shower, much more lands are irrigated with the nice water to grow more foods, more cities are lit with the power generated by the hydroelectric power plants built on the Nile, and so on. That's exactly why this narrow strip of land is called Egypt's lifeline. And now, after thousands of years, this lifeline might be cut by another country, Ethiopia.
It has the potential to give millions of people electricity, to transform the country. Downstream, Egypt is furious and worried.
The Nile is the longest river in the world, and it runs through many countries. Its two main tributaries are the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile, which starts from the Great Lakes region of Central Africa, flows north until it reaches Khartoum, Sudan's capital, where it converges with the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile itself originates in Ethiopia's Lake Tana and provides more than 85% of the water that flows into the Nile River. Ethiopia, which hosts the source of the Blue Nile, is about to complete the construction of Africa's largest and the world's 7th largest hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile, roughly 20 kilometers away from the border with Sudan. Once completed, the dam will generate 6,500 megawatts of energy, and its reservoir will be able to hold 74 billion cubic meters of water in it, a close number to the Nile River's average annual flow of 84 billion cubic meters. It's a huge project not only for Ethiopia, but for the entire African continent. Its main function is to produce electricity. Ethiopia has a population of 150 million people, and 68% of its population lives without electricity. Once finished, the dam will provide electricity to over 78 million Ethiopians. Currently, they are using waste and biomass as the main source of energy. Also, only 24% of primary schools and 30% of health clinics have access to electricity. Due to the lack of energy, Ethiopia hasn't been able to industrialize and heavily depended on agriculture to keep its economy functioning. But the good news is that Ethiopians haven't given up. They are trying hard to create a bright future for their country. That's why they are building Africa's largest hydroelectric dam. They expect the dam to transform almost every field in the country, and thus named it the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It will provide households with clean and affordable energy. The electricity will help them industrialize Ethiopia and improve agriculture. It may also transform education and bring the internet to rural areas. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will not only provide Ethiopia's people with electricity, it will make Ethiopia Africa's largest power exporter as well. Ethiopia will be able to make hundreds of millions of dollars by selling surplus energy to the neighboring countries. countries. Because of these estimated benefits, the dam has become a symbol of national pride in Ethiopia, and Ethiopians are really obsessed with it. But on the other hand, in the two downstream countries, Sudan and Egypt, people are not very excited about Ethiopia's megadam project. It's long been a source of tension between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia, especially between Egypt and Ethiopia. Egypt considers this project as an existential threat and a matter of national security. It says the dam poses a serious threat to Egypt's Nile water flow, on which it almost entirely depends to meet its freshwater needs. According to the Egyptian government, the new dam will decrease the annual flooding, which is one of the most important natural events as it enriches Egypt's farmlands with sediments that are vital for growing food in the region. Their other concern is for their own Renaissance dam, the Aswan High Dam, which was built in the 1960s. It revolutionized almost every field in Egypt, the same way Ethiopians expect their own dam will do once completed. Moreover, thanks to the Aswan High Dam, they are able to store the floodwater in its huge reservoir and use it during droughts. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam might result in significantly less water in Egypt's Aswan High Dam and therefore lead to serious food and electricity shortages in the country. Less water in the Nile will also disrupt transportation along the Nile in Egypt. And yes, the Nile is still an important transport route for them. However, Egypt's main concern is about the process through which Ethiopia fills its dam. The dam's water volume is enormous, and filling it might cause serious interruptions to Egypt's water supplies from the Nile and empty the Aswan High Dam, which would have devastating results for Egypt. That's probably the reason Egyptians see Ethiopia's dam as an existential threat. Ethiopia started the construction of its mega dam in 2011 during the peak of the Arab Spring, when former president of Egypt Hosni Mubarak had to step down as a result of mass protests, and the country was consumed by internal instability. This transitional period took 2 years, and later Egypt accused Ethiopia of taking an advantage of Egypt's internal turmoil to start the construction of its mega dam, and Egypt has long tried to sabotage the dam's construction by different means. Since the early 1900s, Egypt has established almost total control of the Nile River. In 1929, Egypt and Great Britain signed an agreement. It allocated 48 billion cubic meters of the Nile's average annual flow of 84 billion cubic meters to Egypt and 4 billion cubic meters to Sudan. The treaty gave Egypt the right to veto projects on the river, and the treaty between Egypt and Sudan in 1959 increased Egypt's portion to 55.5 billion cubic meters and Sudan's to 18.5 billion cubic meters. The rest 10 billion cubic meters water was sought to account for seepage and evaporation. Egypt demands that Ethiopia use the Blue Nile's water according to those agreements, but Ethiopia was never a party to any of them, and thus it considers itself not bound to them and free to construct its own projects on the river. Egypt, together with Sudan, has long tried to bring Ethiopia to the negotiating table and agreed to a binding agreement regulating the process of filling and operating the dam. But the talks ended in a deadlock repeatedly amid mounting fears of a military conflict. Even Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed answered Egypt's threats by saying, quote, "Some say things about the use of force. It should be underlined that no force could stop Ethiopia from building a dam. If there is a need to go to war, we could get millions ready. If some could fire a missile, others could use bombs. But that's not in the best interest of all of us." Seeing Ethiopia's determination to construct and operate the dam without any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, the Egyptian government tried hard to lobby the African Development Bank and the World Bank not to finance Ethiopia's megadam project. But Ethiopians didn't give up. They gathered the money through crowdfunding. The Ethiopians in the country and abroad raised $4.5 billion for their $5.5 billion mega project. The rest $1 billion was loaned by the Chinese Exim Bank. So, having secured the amount of money it needed, Ethiopia confidently proceeded with the construction of the dam. And finally, in 2020, in the absence of any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that they are starting to fill the reservoir. Of course, it freaked out Egypt and Sudan, and shortly after the announcement, Egypt appealed to the United Nations Security Council to intervene in the situation and described Ethiopia's actions as an imminent threat to the international peace and security. The UN Security Council called the sides to continue negotiations under the African Union, and they did so. But unfortunately, the talks ended in a stalemate again, and Ethiopia started the first phase of the filling of the dam's huge water reservoir. 2 years later, on February 20, 2022, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed inaugurated the dam after the second filling and said it was 84% complete, with 18.5 billion cubic meters of water in its reservoir. The inauguration also marked the generation of electricity from one of the 13 turbines in the dam for the first time, producing a capacity of 375 megawatts of energy. During the inauguration, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that from that time on, there would be nothing that would stop Ethiopia. But he also said that, quote, "We want to export our pollution-free electricity to Europe through Sudan and Egypt. So the way forward is cooperation among us. Ethiopia doesn't want or intend to harm anyone else." To counteract Ethiopia, Egypt started deepening its ties with Sudan, including military cooperation and joint training. And according to another agency, Egypt is trying to support defined insurgency groups in Ethiopia to sabotage the process of filling the dam and its operation by igniting internal conflicts in the country. Despite all this strong opposition from Egypt and criticisms from some international organizations, Ethiopia says the dam will benefit every country in the region, including the two downstream countries, Sudan and Egypt. Apart from selling affordable electricity to its neighboring countries, Ethiopia promises it will prevent the disastrous floods in Sudan that cause devastation every year. Also, Ethiopia has very high annual rainfall, which in turn will help it keep water in its reservoir for a long time with much lower evaporation losses compared to Egypt's Aswan High Dam. Thanks to it, they will be able to provide Egypt and Sudan with water during dry years, and it will be extremely useful for them, for irrigation purposes especially. But Egypt and Sudan's concerns should also be taken into account while operating Ethiopia's megadam. The Nile River has been a critical lifeline that literally brought life to the desert since ancient times. Even without the dam, this lifeline is already running dry, and there are many reasons for that, such as climate change, poor maintenance, mismanagement, etc. And therefore Egypt, anticipating more droughts, has demanded Ethiopia's megadam be filled slowly, not sooner than the early 2030s, in order to mitigate the negative effects of the dam on Egypt. But Ethiopia, which has tied its destiny to the project, wants it fully operational as soon as possible and to start generating the maximum electricity of 6,500 megawatts. Apart from the risks the filling process poses, there are other concerns too around the dam. First, Ethiopia has the most earthquake-prone area in Africa, and thus it's very susceptible to earthquake-related hazards. Second, overthrowing governments by military coups is very typical of African states. If it happens in Ethiopia one day and a military dictator comes to power, then he might manipulate the Nile for his own ambitions. Therefore, it means Ethiopia has tied Egypt and Sudan's destiny to the dam as well. Anyway, according to the Ethiopian government, the third filling is planned to take place in August and September this year, without an agreement with Egypt and Sudan. Therefore, the risks are high that the conflict may reignite again at any moment, with repercussions likely to be felt across the region. To be more precise, the tensions haven't eased in the region since the dam's construction began, but it's significantly lost international attention due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Nevertheless, I personally admire the passion, drive, and determination of Ethiopians to take their own destiny into their own hands and start creating a bright future for their motherland. They deserve a huge respect for their efforts and strong political will to realize their nationwide dream. It also sets a good example to other African countries to all turn the page of their dark colonial era and start building their countries. With regard to the water dispute, I believe if properly handled, the Nile River has sufficient water to benefit all the countries in its basin. But unfortunately, there is a severe lack of collaboration between them. Therefore, I really hope they restart the negotiations very soon and reach an agreement to operate that magnificent dam in a way that will contribute to each of them. Ethiopia once pioneered the resistance against colonialism in Africa by successfully defending against the Italians and even defeating them. It inspired other African countries and paved their way to independence. I really wish that this time too, Ethiopia struggles to emerge from a past filled with economic and political dysfunction will really inspire the rest of the continent and pave the way to a better Africa.